The shriek of metal echoed through the bridge as Captain Galen slammed his fist into the control console, denting the titanium panel. The subjugation of the human colony had gone disastrously wrong. These small, soft, pitiful humans were supposed to be easy prey, but they fought with a savage ferocity that caught the Ledosians completely off guard. The human slaves overthrew their new masters in a matter of days. "We should have taken their dogs instead," Galen snarled at his executive officer, Tarok. "Did you see those earth beasts rip out the throats of our soldiers? What madness compelled us to enslave the ones who created such perfect killing machines?" Tarok pulled up a data file on the canines. Most of the breeds were engineered by humans to guard, fight, and kill on command. Perfectly obedient tools of violence. He showed the file to Galen. "Look at this, sir. It's not just the dogs. Humans reshape every species they touch to serve their will. They adopted the weakest creatures in the galaxy and forged them into the strongest weapons. That's humanity's true power." "Bah!" Galen waved away the screen. "If we had the humans' strength and durability, the galaxy would already be ours. Their physical gifts are wasted on them." Galen and Tarok shared a look. This lone human captive might hold the key to defeating its dangerous species. They would get the truth out of it, no matter what it took. The fate of the Ledosian Empire depended on breaking this human. But as the human scream started echoing through the ship, the aliens began to wonder. Just what kind of monster had they brought aboard their vessel? And what would it do to them when it finally broke free? A commotion erupted on the bridge as the human prisoner was forced through the blast doors, manacled and flanked by a squad of Ledosian guards. Despite his restraints, the human moved with a swagger, his eyes flashing defiantly. The security team regarded their captive uneasily, tightening their grips on their shock batons. Even outnumbered and shackled, this lone human seemed to radiate danger. The human looked up at Galen, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Then, to the shock of all present, he began to laugh, a dark, humorless chuckle that sent chills down the spines of the Ledosian crew. "You want to know humanity's big secret?" the human said, his voice rough from thirst and pain. "It's not a secret at all. You're just too blind to see it." Galen's fists clenched, but he held himself back. "Enlighten us then, human." The prisoner straightened as much as his bonds would allow. "My name is Jesse Clark, and humanity's greatest weapon is the ability to see potential where you see only weakness." Jesse looked around the bridge, taking in the advanced alien technology and the hostile faces of his captors. "When we first met other species, we were shocked. So many of you culled your runts, exterminated the sick and imperfect, just like you Ledosians do." Galen's eyes narrowed. How did this human know so much about their ways? "But humans, we don't think like that," Jesse continued. "We adopt the broken, the discarded, and we turn them into our protectors, our partners. We make them strong." The human's gaze settled on a flickering hollow image floating above the strategy table. It showed a small, timid creature, with wide eyes and quivering whiskers, a keek, the Ledosians' favorite prey species. You look at the keeks and see easy meat, but humans would have seen their intelligence, their empathy. Under our guidance, engineered like the dogs of Earth, the keeks would have become a force to be reckoned with. Galen scoffed openly. "You speak madness, human. The keeks are weak, as are you, and the weak shall always be ruled by the strong." Fire flashed in Jesse's eyes. "That's where you're wrong, Captain. Humanity's strength comes from uplifting others, from seeing the value in every species, and that's something your kind will never understand." The human's words struck a nerve. With a roar of rage, Galen seized Jesse by the throat, lifting him bodily off the deck. "I will have the truth from you, even if I must rip it from your broken corpse." But even as he gasped for air, the human called Jesse Clark showed no fear. He met Galen's furious gaze and Force's a strained grin. "Do your worst, Captain. It won't change a thing. You've already lost this war. You just don't know it yet." Light years away from the tense confrontation on the Ledosian warship, Captain Galen's teenage son Thel trudged along a dirt path, kicking at loose pebbles. He was part of a mandatory school field trip to the Keek Wildlife Preserve on the Ledosian homeworld. Thel's classmates snickered and jeered as they observed the small, meek creatures scampering about their enclosures. "Look at those pathetic little runts," Thel's friend Zorak sneered, tossing a rock at a Keek who let out a frightened squeak and darted for cover. "No wonder they're only good for target practice and meat." Thel nodded, but his heart wasn't in it. He found the docile Keeks incredibly boring. As the teacher droned on about the Keeks' role in the ecosystem, Thel slipped away from the group, wandering off into a dense copse of trees. He figured he'd catch a quick nap and rejoin the class before anyone noticed his absence. But as he pushed through the underbrush, Thel stumbled into a hidden section of the preserve he had never seen before. He froze, his jaw dropping in shock. There, in a small clearing, stood an elderly human male, surrounded by a group of Keeks. The Keeks were not cowering or fleeing, but were eagerly circling the human, chittering excitedly. Thel watched in disbelief as the human guided the Keeks through what appeared to be an obstacle course, gesturing for them to climb, jump, and weave their way through a series of complex barriers. The Keeks responded with surprising speed and agility, navigating the course with ease. Next, the human held up a series of colored shapes, and the Keeks quickly sorted them into matching piles. Finally, the human issued a series of verbal commands, and the Keeks performed a dizzying array of acrobatic maneuvers in perfect synchronization. Thel rubbed his eyes, convinced he was hallucinating. Keeks were supposed to be dumb, primitive creatures, yet these ones were displaying intelligence and physical prowess far beyond anything he had ever seen or heard of. Lost in his thoughts, Thel didn't notice the human had spotted him until the man called out in perfect Ledosian, "Hello there, young man. No need to be afraid. Why don't you come closer and see for yourself what these remarkable creatures can do?" Thel's heart pounded in his chest as he weighed his options. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his curiosity won out. Cautiously, he approached the human, who smiled warmly and extended a wrinkled hand. "Dr. Emmett Roth, xenobiologist," the human introduced himself. "I've been studying the Keeks in secret for many years, and I must say, they never cease to amaze me." But how?" Thel sputtered, gesturing at the Keeks, who were now solving a complex puzzle box with their dexterous paws. "Keeks are supposed to be simple, stupid creatures, nothing like this." The human showed Thel page after page of meticulous notes and observations, detailing the Keeks' hidden abilities. Thel's mind reeled as he struggled to process this new information. "If what you're saying is true," Thel said slowly, "then the Keeks could be so much more than prey or pests. They could be—" He trailed off, hardly daring to voice the thought aloud. "Partners?" Dr. Roth finished gently. "Allies? Friends, even? Yes, young man, that's precisely what they could be, what they should be." Thel looked at the Keeks with new eyes, seeing past the timid, quivering exteriors to the untapped potential within. His whole world felt like it had been turned upside down. Dr. Roth placed a weathered hand on Thel's shoulder. "I can see the wheels turning in your head, son. You're starting to question what you've been taught, and that's a good thing." The human's eyes twinkled with warmth and wisdom. "I'd like to teach you more about the Keeks if you're willing to learn, to open your mind to new possibilities. What do you say?" Thel swallowed hard, his heart racing. He knew he should say no, should run back to the safety of his classmates and the comfortable lies he had been fed his whole life. But something stopped him, a flicker of doubt, a spark of curiosity that refused to be extinguished. He met Dr. Roth's gaze and nodded slowly. "Teach me." In the weeks that followed his fateful encounter with Dr. Roth, Thel found himself sneaking away from his duties and classes with increasing frequency. Under the guise of solitary nature walks, he ventured deep into the wildlife preserve, his heart racing with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. There, in a secluded glade, he met with the human xenobiologist and a small group of Keeks, hand-picked for their exceptional intelligence and adaptability. At first, Thel was hesitant to interact with the creatures he had been taught to view as inferior, but as he watched Dr. Roth patiently guide the Keeks through a series of increasingly complex tasks and challenges, his skepticism gave way to awe. The Keeks learned at an astonishing rate, their nimble paws manipulating tools and solving puzzles with a dexterity that rivaled even the most skilled Ledosian engineers. More than their cognitive abilities, however, it was the Keeks' capacity for empathy and cooperation that truly astounded Thel. He watched as they worked together seamlessly, communicating with a complex language of chirps and gestures that Dr. Roth seemed to understand intuitively. And when one of their number struggled with a particular task, the others would rally around them, offering encouragement and support until they succeeded. As the days turned into weeks, Thel found himself growing increasingly attached to his new companions. He marveled at their progress and the deep bonds they formed with one another and with Dr. Roth. For the first time in his life, he began to question the rigid hierarchies and prejudices that underpinned Ledosian society. But their clandestine activities could not remain hidden forever. One fateful afternoon, as Thel and Dr. Roth were overseeing a particularly challenging obstacle course, the sharp crack of a plasma rifle shattered the tranquil forest air. Thel whirled around to see a heavily armed Ledosian security patrol emerging from the trees, their weapons trained on the human and the Keeks. "Thel, run!" Dr. Roth yelled, pushing the young Ledosian behind him as he reached for his own sidearm. The Keeks scattered in all directions, their terrified squeaks echoing through the glade. Thel hesitated for a split second, torn between his instinct to obey authority and his newfound loyalty to his friends. But as the patrol opened fire, sending searing bolts of plasma scorching past his head, he made his choice. Grabbing Dr. Roth's hand, he pulled the human into the dense undergrowth, the Keeks close on their heels. They ran for what felt like hours, the sounds of pursuit never far behind. Finally, gasping for breath and drenched in sweat, they collapsed in a small clearing, the Keeks huddling close for comfort and protection. As they caught their breath, Dr. Roth turned to Thel, his eyes grave. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I'm not just a xenobiologist studying the Keeks. I'm part of a covert human organization dedicated to uplifting and protecting vulnerable species across the galaxy." Thel's eyes widened in shock as Dr. Roth continued. "We've been working to establish a network of Keek resistance cells on Ledos, with the goal of eventually overthrowing the Ledosian regime and creating a more equitable society, one where Keeks and Ledosians can coexist as equals." Thel's mind reeled at the revelation. A Keek resistance overthrowing the government? It was almost too much to process, but as he looked around at the Keeks, their intelligent eyes watching him with trust and hope, he felt a stirring of something deep within him, a sense of rightness, of purpose. Just as Dr. Roth opened his mouth to share more details about the resistance movement, a plasma bolt sizzled through the air, striking the human in the chest. He crumpled to the ground, blood pooling beneath him, as the Keeks let out shrieks of terror and despair. Thel didn't hesitate. Ignoring the searing pain in his lungs, he grabbed Dr. Roth under the arms and dragged him deeper into the forest, away from the sounds of the approaching patrol. The Keeks scattered into the undergrowth, their mournful cries fading into the distance. Finally, when he could run no further, Thel collapsed next to Dr. Roth, cradling the human's head in his lap. The xenobiologist's breathing was shallow and labored, his eyes glazed with pain. With a trembling hand, Dr. Roth pressed a small data drive into Thel's palm. "This contains information about the resistance network and the location of our secret base on Ledos. Get it to Jesse. He's our only hope now." Thel nodded, tears streaming down his face as he watched the life drain from Dr. Roth's eyes. The human's grip on his hand slackened and his head lolled to the side, a final breath escaping his lips. For a long moment, Thel sat there numb with shock and grief. Then slowly he got to his feet, the data drive clutched tightly in his fist. He looked around at the silent forest, the weight of his newfound knowledge and responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. He was alone now, torn between his loyalty to his own people and his growing belief in the human's cause. But as he thought of the Keeks, of their untapped potential and the bonds he had formed with them, he knew what he had to do. Taking a deep breath, Thel turned his face toward the distant city, where the human prisoner Jesse Clark was being held. He had a message to deliver, a resistance to join, and a choice to make that would determine not only his own fate, but the future of the Keeks and the Ledosian people. The cell door slammed open with a metallic clang. 2 heavily armed Ledosian guards stormed in, plasma rifles leveled at Jesse's chest. The human tensed, ready to fight, but before he could make a move, a small blur of fur and claws launched itself at the guards. Zix moved with blinding speed, his tiny form darting between the guards' legs. The Keek lashed out with surgical precision, striking at pressure points and nerve clusters with a mastery that left Jesse stunned. In seconds, the guards crumpled to the floor, their weapons clattering uselessly beside them. Jesse gaped at Zix, astonishment and pride warring on his battered face. "Zix, that was incredible. When did you learn to fight like that?" The Keek chittered softly, his large eyes gleaming with intelligence. "Jesse teach Zix. Zix learn, adapt, grow strong, like Jesse say." Together, the unlikely duo burst out of the cell block, alarms blaring in their wake. Ledosian soldiers poured into the corridors, plasma bolts sizzling through the air. Jesse and Zix moved as one, the human providing covering fire while the Keek darted ahead, scouting the path and disabling security systems with a few deft swipes of his claws. As they fought their way deeper into the ship, Jesse caught sight of a communications room. "Zix, cover me," he shouted, ducking inside. His fingers flew over the alien controls, muscle memory from a lifetime of training guiding his movements. In seconds, he had composed a coded message detailing their location and the Ledosian ship's weaknesses. With a final keystroke, he sent the transmission winging towards the incoming human fleet. Just as they turned to leave, a plasma bolt seared past Jesse's head, missing by millimeters. Galen stood in the doorway, a platoon of heavily armed soldiers at his back. The Ledosian captain's face twisted with rage and disgust as he took in the sight of Jesse and Zix standing side by side, weapons raised. "You dare corrupt one of our own with your vile human ideals?" Galen snarled, leveling his rifle at Jesse's chest. "The Keeks are nothing, a footnote in the Ledosian Empire's glorious history, and you will die for your insolence." Plasma bolts filled the air as Jesse and Zix dove for cover, returning fire with a hail of precisely aimed shots. The human and the Keek moved in perfect synchronicity, their bond forged through shared hardship and a fierce belief in each other's potential. Galen roared with fury, charging forward through the chaos. He slammed into Jesse, sending them both tumbling to the ground in a tangle of limbs. The Ledosian captain rained down blows, his eyes alight with hatred. "You think the Keeks are your equals?" Galen sneered, his fists hammering into Jesse's ribs. "You're a fool, human. The weak will always serve the strong. That is the natural order of things." Jesse blocked a punch and rolled, coming up in a crouch. "You're wrong, Galen," he panted, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Strength comes from unity, from trust, something you'll never understand." Galen lunged forward, his hands closing around Jesse's throat. The human choked, spots dancing before his eyes. But just as the darkness threatened to claim him, a small, furry form crashed into Galen's back. Zix sank his teeth into the Ledosian's neck, his claws scrabbling for purchase. Galen howled in pain, his grip on Jesse loosening. The human surged upward, driving his fist into Galen's jaw with every ounce of strength he possessed. The Ledosian captain crumpled, his eyes rolling back in his head. Jesse staggered to his feet, gasping for air. Zix leapt down beside him, blood staining his fur. "Good work, little buddy," Jesse rasped, ruffling the Keek's ears. "Now let's get the hell off this ship." They sprinted through the corridors, the sound of pursuit echoing behind them. The hangar bay doors loomed ahead, a promise of freedom. But as they rounded the final corner, Jesse skidded to a halt, his heart leaping into his throat. There, blocking their path, stood Thel. The young Ledosian's face was a mask of conflict and uncertainty, a weapon trembling in his hands. Jesse and Zix exchanged a glance, their muscles tensing as they prepared for yet another fight. Jesse and Zix froze, weapons raised as they faced the lone figure blocking their escape. But as Thel slowly lowered his plasma rifle, hands trembling, Jesse's eyes widened in recognition. "You're Galen's son," he said cautiously, not lowering his own weapon. "What do you want?" Thel swallowed hard, his voice shaking. "I want to help you escape. I have information about the Keeks, about a resistance." He reached into his pocket and Jesse tensed, finger tightening on the trigger. But instead of a weapon, Thel withdrew a small data drive, holding it out to Jesse. "Dr. Roth gave this to me before he died," Thel said, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It has everything you need to know about the Keek resistance cells on Lados. You have to get it to your people." "Why are you helping us?" Zix chittered, his small form still poised to strike if necessary. Thel met the Keek's gaze, a look of fierce determination on his face. "Because Dr. Roth showed me the truth, that the Keeks are so much more than my people believe, that together we could build a better future for all of us." The young Ladosian gestured towards a nearby shuttle. "Come on, I can get you off this ship, but we have to hurry." The trio raced across the hangar bay, boots pounding on the metal deck. But just as they reached the shuttle ramp, alarms began to blare, red lights flashing in warning. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as the three dove for cover, returning fire with grim precision. Jesse and Zix worked in seamless tandem, the human providing suppressing fire while the Keek darted forward, striking at the soldiers with blinding speed. Thel fought alongside them, his plasma rifle spitting deadly bolts of energy. He moved with a fluid grace, his time training with the Keeks having honed his reflexes to a razor's edge. But the Ladosians kept coming, pouring into the hangar in an endless tide. Jesse cursed as a plasma bolt seared past his cheek, the heat blistering his skin. They were running out of time. "Get to the shuttle," he yelled over the din of battle. "I'll cover you." Zix and Thel sprinted up the ramp, Jesse laying down a withering hail of fire to keep the soldiers at bay. But just as he turned to follow, a searing pain exploded in his shoulder, sending him staggering to his knees. Through blurred vision, he saw Thel crumple, a smoking hole in his chest. Zix leapt to the Ladosian's side, dragging him into the shuttle with a burst of desperate strength. Jesse forced himself to his feet, lurching up the ramp as plasma bolts scorched the air around him. He slammed his fist into the door controls, the ramp sealing shut with a hiss of hydraulics. Stumbling into the cockpit, he threw himself into the pilot's seat, hands flying over the unfamiliar controls. The shuttle lurched drunkenly as he wrenched it off the deck, engines screaming in protest. In the rear of the craft, Zix hunched over Thel's still form, chittering frantically as he tore strips of fabric from his own clothing to stem the flow of blood. The Ladosian's breaths came in shallow gasps, his eyes glazed with pain. Jesse gritted his teeth as the shuttle streaked out of the hangar, alarms shrieking in warning as the Ladosian warship opened fire. The small craft shuddered as plasma bolts slammed into its shields, the energy barriers flaring with each impact. Evasive maneuvers threw them hard against their restraints as Jesse jinked and wove, desperately trying to evade the pursuing fighters. Sweat poured down his face, the controls bucking in his grip as he pushed the shuttle to its limits. Zix appeared in the cockpit doorway, his fur matted with Thel's blood. "He's stable for now," the Keek reported, his voice tight with strain, "but he needs medical attention soon." Jesse nodded grimly, not taking his eyes off the view screen. The Ladosian fighters were closing in, their weapons hammering at the shuttle's failing shields. "Just a little longer," he muttered, more to himself than to Zix. "We just have to hold out a little longer." But even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was hopeless. The shuttle was too badly damaged, the fighters too many. They had fought so hard, come so far, only to be cut down at the very edge of escape. And then, like a miracle, the stars outside the view screen erupted in a blaze of light. Massive human warships dropped out of hyperspace, their guns opening up on the Ladosian fighters with ruthless efficiency. Jesse let out a whoop of joy as the enemy craft scattered, the human fleet clearing a path for the battered shuttle. With a final burst of speed, they streaked towards the flagship, the hangar bay doors yawning open to receive them. The shuttle touched down with a bone-jarring thud, Jesse slumping back in his seat as the adrenaline drained from his body. Zix was already moving, hurrying to Thel's side as the ramp lowered to admit a team of human medics. As Jesse stumbled down the ramp, he found himself face to face with a grizzled human admiral, his uniform heavy with medals and campaign ribbons. The old soldier clasped Jesse's hand in a firm grip, his eyes bright with respect. "Jesse Clark, I presume," the admiral said, his voice a deep rumble. "We got your message. Damn fine work, son, damn fine." Jesse managed a tired grin, handing over the data drive with a trembling hand. "Sir, there's something you need to see. The Keeks, they're not what we thought. They're so much more." The admiral took the drive, his brow furrowing as he turned it over in his fingers. "I look forward to your full report, Mr. Clark. But first, we need to get you and your friends to medical." As Thel was rushed away on a stretcher, Zix hovering anxiously at his side, the admiral placed a hand on Jesse's shoulder, steering him towards a waiting group of officers. "Walk with me, son," the old soldier said, his voice low and urgent. "We have a lot to discuss and not much time. The Ladosians won't take this lying down. We need to plan our next move, and fast." Jesse nodded, straightening his spine despite the pain and exhaustion dragging at his limbs. The fight was far from over, he knew, but with the human fleet at his back and the Keek resistance at his side, he felt a flicker of hope burning in his chest. A hope for a future where humans and Keek stood together as equals, as partners, a future worth fighting for no matter the cost. In the war room of the human flagship, Jesse stood before the assembled admirals and generals, his voice ringing with conviction. Zix perched on his shoulder, a living testament to the potential of the Keeks. Thel, still bearing the scars of his sacrifice, stood at Jesse's side, a symbol of the unlikely alliance they had forged. "The Keeks are the key to victory," Jesse declared, his eyes blazing with intensity. "With our help they can become a force the Ladosians will never see coming." He brought up the schematics and intelligence Dr. Roth had gathered, laying out a plan to arm and train the Keek resistance. The officers murmured, some with skepticism, others with growing interest. "It's a risk," one admiral said, frowning at the display. "We'd be putting a lot of faith in an unproven ally." Jesse nodded, acknowledging the concern. "I know it's unconventional, but the Ladosians will never expect it. They've underestimated the Keeks for too long. That's their weakness." Zix chose that moment to leap from Jesse's shoulder, landing gracefully on the war table. The officers drew back, startled, as the small Keek began to manipulate the holographic controls with lightning speed. In seconds, he had pulled up a simulation of a Ladosian supply depot, complete with troop deployments and defensive emplacements. With a few deft swipes of his paw, Zix began to highlight weak points, blind spots, and vulnerable routes of approach. The officers watched in stunned silence as the Keek laid out a surgical strike plan that would cripple the depot with minimal risk to the attackers. A murmur of approval rippled through the room. The tide was turning. One by one, the officers began to nod, convinced by the undeniable proof of the Keek's capabilities. The commanding admiral stood, his face set with determination. "All right, Clark, you have a go. Assemble your team and make contact with the Keek resistance. It's time we took this fight to the Ladosians in a way they'll never expect." As the meeting broke up, Thel approached Jesse, his expression resolute. "I'm coming with you," he said, his voice brooking no argument. "You'll need someone who knows Ladosian tactics, someone who can help coordinate the Keeks on the ground." Jesse clasped Thel's shoulder, a grin spreading across his face. "I wouldn't have it any other way," he said. "Welcome aboard, Thel." Within hours, Jesse had assembled his team, a hand-picked group of human special forces and intelligence operatives, each one chosen for their skill, adaptability, and willingness to embrace unconventional warfare. With Zix and Thel at his side, Jesse felt a surge of confidence. They were about to reshape the very nature of this war. As their stealth shuttle descended through the night skies of Lados, Jesse looked out at the dense forests below, knowing that somewhere down there, the Keek resistance awaited them. The Ladosians thought they had crushed the Keek's spirit, that they had extinguished any hope of defiance. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The shuttle touched down in a clearing deep within the tangled wilderness, the whine of its engines fading to silence. Jesse and his team moved out, melting into the shadows of the trees. They had a rendezvous to make, a resistance to build, and a war to win. On a distant ridge, a lone Keek sentry watched the human craft disappear into the forest, a flicker of hope kindling in its breast. The humans had come, just as the legends foretold. The time of cowering and hiding was over. In a hidden glade miles from any Ladosian settlement, Jesse and his team rendezvoused with the leaders of the Keek resistance. Zix leapt forward with a cry of joy, embracing his fellow Keeks with a fierce intensity. The Keeks chirped and chattered excitedly, their eyes wide with wonder at the sight of the humans and the weapons they carried. Jesse stepped forward, Thel at his side. "We've come to help you fight," he said, his voice carrying through the assembled Keeks, "to teach you how to strike back against those who have oppressed you for so long." One of the Keek leaders, an aged, grizzled creature with a scar across his snout, stepped forward. "We are ready," he said, his voice thrumming with a deep resolve. "Show us the way." And so, deep in the forests of Lados, the training began. Jesse and his team established hidden camps, drilling the Keeks in the arts of sabotage, infiltration, and asymmetric warfare. They taught them how to build improvised explosives, how to lay ambushes, and how to strike and fade like ghosts in the night. Thel proved invaluable, his knowledge of Ladosian tactics and deployments, allowing them to plan strikes with uncanny precision. He taught the Keeks the weaknesses of Ladosian vehicles, the blind spots in their sensor nets, and the choke points in their supply lines. As the weeks passed, the Keeks grew in skill and confidence. Their natural agility and intelligence, so long dismissed by the Ladosians, became lethal assets. They learned to move unseen through the treetops, to communicate with subtle gestures and signs, and to coordinate their attacks with a fluidity that left the Ladosians reeling. And then the raids began. Supply convoys began to vanish, their escorts found slain in the road. Communications relays went dark, their components scattered and destroyed. Ladosian patrols walked into ambushes, their weapons and equipment spirited away into the night. Chaos began to spread behind Ladosian lines as the Keeks struck again and again, always fading away before reinforcements could arrive. The Ladosian commanders, already hard-pressed by the human offensive, found themselves facing a new and terrifying threat, an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, striking without warning and vanishing like mist. In his command bunker, Galen pored over the reports of the growing Keek insurgency, his face darkening with each new attack. He slammed his fist on the map table, scattering holographic unit markers. "I want them found," he snarled to his subordinates. "I want them rooted out and exterminated, no mercy, no quarter. These vermin have gnawed at the roots of our civilization for too long. It's time we burned them out once and for all." But even as Galen raged and plotted, the Keeks continued their onslaught, guided by Jesse, Zix, and Thel. They were a scalpel in the night, a whisper of defiance that grew louder with each passing day. The Ladosians had sown the seeds of their own destruction, and now, at long last, the harvest of retribution was at hand. The Ladosian soldiers moved through the underbrush, their plasma rifles sweeping the shadows. They had been hunting the Keek rebels for days, following the trail of sabotaged equipment and ambushed patrols deeper into the wilderness. But the Keeks remained elusive, striking and fading like phantoms. The squad leader, a grizzled veteran named Kelos, held up a fist, bringing the patrol to a halt. He had seen movement in the trees ahead, a flicker of fur and eyes in the dappled sunlight. He gestured silently, spreading his troops out into a skirmish line. They advanced slowly, scanning the foliage for any sign of the enemy. But the forest was still, the only sound the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. From the corner of his eye he saw a flicker of movement. He turned, bringing his rifle to bear, but he was too slow. A small, lithe form burst from the undergrowth, leaping towards him with impossible speed. All around the clearing the scene repeated itself. Keeks swarmed from the shadows, moving with a fluid grace that belied their deadly purpose. They danced among the soldiers, striking with knives and garrots, darting back into cover before the Ladosians could respond. And leading the charge, a lone human, his face a mask of determination. He wielded a plasma rifle with expert precision, cutting down Ladosians with each burst. At his side, a keek with a distinctive scar across its snout, directing the assault with sharp gestures and chittering commands. In minutes it was over. The Ladosian patrol lay dead or dying, their weapons and equipment scattered across the blood-soaked ground. The keeks melted back into the forest, dragging their wounded with them. Jesse lowered his rifle, breathing hard. Zix clambered up to his shoulder, chittering softly in his ear. "They fought well," Jesse murmured, looking out at the carnage. "They're learning fast." "Keeks always learn fast," Zix replied, a fierce pride in his voice. "Keeks adapt. Keeks survive." But even as Galen plotted his revenge, the Keeks and their human allies pressed on, striking deeper into the heart of the Ladosian occupation. They were a spark, setting the dry tinder of rebellion ablaze. And on Lidos, the winds of change were rising, fanning the flames of a revolution that would consume an empire. The Keek crouched in the shadows of the Ladosian supply depot, his heart pounding in his chest. Around him, a dozen of his fellow rebels lay in wait, their weapons clutched tight. Above them, on the depot's roof, Jesse and Thel moved silently, planting explosive charges at key structural points. This was to be their most daring strike yet, a devastating blow to the Ladosian war machine. The Keek's name was Rika, and just a few short months ago he had been a simple forager, scraping a meager living from the fringes of the forest. But then the humans had come, and with them Zix, bearing tales of resistance and rebellion. Rika had joined eagerly, throwing himself into the training with a fervor that surprised even himself. He had learned to fight, to sabotage, to strike fear into the hearts of his oppressors. And now, here he was, about to strike the greatest blow of all. A soft click in his earpiece signaled that Jesse and Thel had finished their work. Rika tensed, his grip tightening on his plasma rifle. Any moment now. The night erupted in a series of blinding flashes and deafening roars as the charges detonated. The depot's walls buckled and collapsed, sending cascades of rubble and sparks raining down. Alarms blared, and Ladosian soldiers poured from the barracks, shouting in confusion and panic. Rika leapt from cover, his comrades at his side. They opened fire as they charged, plasma bolts stitching through the ranks of the disoriented Ladosians. Rika felt a savage joy surge through him as he watched his tormentors fall. This was vengeance, long overdue. From the roof, Jesse and Thel rained fire down on the Ladosians, picking off officers and heavy weapons teams with ruthless efficiency. Zix darted among the enemy, a blur of fur and steel, his knives finding gaps in armor with uncanny precision. The battle was fierce but brief. The Ladosians, caught utterly off guard, never stood a chance. Within minutes the depot was theirs, its supplies and equipment ripe for the taking. As the smoke cleared, Rika stood amid the ruins, his chest heaving with exertion and exhilaration. Jesse clapped him on the shoulder, his face split by a grin. "Well done, Rika," the human said, his eyes gleaming with pride. "You fought like a true warrior today." Rika felt a swell of pride at the praise. He had come so far from a cowering scavenger to a rebel fighter, and he knew with a certainty that burned in his bones that he would never go back to what he was. As the rebels began to strip the depot of its supplies, Thel approached, his face somber. "We've struck a great blow today," he said, his voice heavy with a mix of pride and sorrow. "But my father will not let this stand. He will come for us, with all the might of the Ladosian military." They had tasted freedom, and they would fight to the last breath to keep it, no matter the cost, no matter the odds. The Keek rebellion had begun, and it would not be stopped. Plasma bolts seared the air as Jesse, Zix, and Thel fought their way through the winding streets of the Ladosian capital. The once pristine avenues were now a war zone, littered with rubble and the twisted remains of burning vehicles. Jesse ducked behind a shattered wall as a barrage of enemy fire raked his position. Zix and Thel crouched beside him, their faces grim with determination. "The main power generator is just ahead," Thel shouted over the din of battle. "But the way is heavily guarded. We'll need to split up to have any chance of breaking through." Jesse nodded, checking the charge on his plasma rifle. "Agreed. Thel, you know this city best. You take the lead and try to breach the command center. Zix and I will make for the generator and plant the explosives." Thel clasped Jesse's arm, his eyes burning with a fierce resolve. "Understood, and Jesse, if you see my father—" "We'll do what we have to," Jesse said, his voice grim. "Now go and stay alive." With a final nod, Thel darted from cover, his weapon blazing as he charged towards the command center. Jesse and Zix watched him go, then turned to face the path to the generator. "Ready, little buddy?" Jesse asked, glancing down at his Keek companion. Zix bared his teeth in a feral grin. "Keek's always ready. Let's go boom." As they neared the generator complex, the resistance intensified. Heavy plasma cannons opened up from fortified positions, forcing Jesse and Zix to take cover in a bombed-out storefront. "We're running out of time," Jesse panted, slamming a fresh power cell into his rifle. "If we don't blow that generator soon, the main attack will be slaughtered." Zix peered around the edge of their cover, his keen eyes scanning the enemy positions. "Jesse, go," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Zix, stay. Fight. Make opening for Jesse." Jesse stared at his friend, his heart clenching. "No way, I'm not leaving you behind." But Zix just shook his head, a sad smile on his furry face. "Only way Jesse plant bombs, Zix buy time, is good trade." Before Jesse could argue, Zix leapt from cover with a fierce battle cry. He bounded towards the enemy line, dodging and weaving through the hail of plasma fire with impossible speed and grace. Jesse watched him go, tears stinging his eyes. Then, with a roar of rage and grief, he charged towards the generator complex, Zix's sacrifice driving him forward. Inside the command center, Thel fought his way through the corridors, dispatching Ledosian guards with ruthless efficiency. His heart hammered in his chest as he neared the central control room, knowing that his father would be there, directing the city's defenses. He burst through the final door, his rifle leveled, and there, standing before the main tactical display, was Galen. Father and son stared at each other across the room, a lifetime of pain and betrayal hanging in the air between them. "Thel," Galen said, his voice cold and hard, "I should have known you would betray your own kind." Thel shook his head, his grip tightening on his weapon. "No, father, it is you who have betrayed us, betrayed the very ideals of our people. The Keeks are not our enemies. They are our brothers, our sisters, and the humans, they are our salvation." Galen's face twisted with rage. "You speak madness, boy. The humans have poisoned your mind with their weakness, their sentiment, and now you will die for it." He lunged forward, a plasma blade flashing to life in his hand. Thel met him head-on, and the room filled with the clash of weapons and the sizzle of energy. They dueled across the control room, father and son, their blades flashing in a deadly dance. Thel fought with all the skill and fury of his training, but Galen was a master warrior, his every move honed by decades of combat. Blow by blow, Galen drove Thel back, his blade scoring deep wounds in his son's flesh. Thel staggered, blood pouring from a dozen cuts, his strength fading. And then, just as Galen raised his blade for the killing stroke, Thel's comlink crackled to life. "Thel!" Jesse's voice strained and desperate. "The charges are set. Blow the generator now." In that moment, as he stared into his father's hate-filled eyes, Thel made his choice. With a final agonized cry, he lunged forward, driving his blade deep into Galen's chest, even as he thumbed the detonator on his belt. The world went white. A massive explosion rocked the city, the shockwave shattering windows and toppling buildings. In the command center, Thel and Galen were thrown to the ground, the room collapsing around them. Thel dragged himself from the rubble, his body broken and bleeding. He looked down at his father's still form, a sob tearing from his throat. Outside, as the smoke cleared, the Keek resistance and human forces poured into the city, overwhelming the stunned and disorganized Ledosian defenders. The battle was fierce and bloody, but in the end, the city fell. Jesse limped through the ruined streets, cradling Zix's broken body in his arms. Tears streamed down his face as he looked upon the devastation, the price of their victory. Thel found him there amid the rubble and the fallen. The two warriors, human and Ledosian, stood side by side, united by their grief and their triumph. "It's over," Thel said, his voice hoarse with pain and exhaustion. "We've won." They looked out over the shattered city, the smoke rising from 100 fires. In the distance, the sound of cheering could be heard as the Keeks and humans celebrated their victory. But for Jesse and Thel, there was no joy, only a grim determination. The war was far from over, and the fight for freedom, for the right of all species to live and thrive as equals, had only just begun. Jesse limped through the rubble-strewn streets, Zix cradled in his arms. The Keek's breathing was shallow, his fur matted with blood. Thel walked beside them, his face a mask of grief and exhaustion. Around them, the once mighty Ledosian capital lay in ruins. Smoke billowed from shattered buildings, and the distant cries of the wounded echoed through the empty avenues. The cost of victory had been high. They made their way to the Provisional Command Center, where human medics rushed to tend to Zix's injuries. As the Keek was carried away on a stretcher, Jesse and Thel collapsed onto a nearby bench, their bodies and minds numb. "It's over," Thel said, his voice hollow. "We won, but at what price?" Jesse said nothing, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The weight of all they had lost hung heavy in the air. In the days that followed, the human forces worked tirelessly to establish order and provide aid to the war-torn planet. Keek refugees flooded into the capital, their eyes wide with a mix of hope and uncertainty. Jesse threw himself into the rebuilding efforts, working side by side with Thel and the newly formed Keek leadership to lay the foundations for a new society. But even as they made progress, a sense of unease gnawed at him. And then the message came. Jesse stood in the command center, his eyes locked on the view screen. The human admiral's face was grim, his words clipped and final. "The government has ordered a full withdrawal," the admiral said. "They fear the consequences of what we've done here, the precedent it sets. We're to leave immediately and cut all ties with Ledos." He argued with the admiral, his voice rising with each impassioned plea. The Keeks needed them, he said. They couldn't just leave them to pick up the pieces alone. But the admiral was unmoved. Orders were orders, and the decision had been made. With a heavy heart, Jesse gathered Zix and Thel to break the news. Zix, still weak from his injuries, listened in stunned silence. Thel's face hardened, a flicker of the old Ledosian pride sparking in his eyes. "We'll find a way," Thel said, his voice firm. "We've come this far, we won't let this defeat us." Jesse clasped his friend's hands, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. "I'll keep fighting for you," he promised. "From Earth, I'll do everything I can to make them see the truth." The human fleet departed in a blaze of engines, the ships dwindling to pinpricks against the sky. On a hilltop overlooking the ruins of the capital, Thel and Zix stood side by side, watching until the last vessel vanished from sight. "What do we do now?" Zix asked, his voice small and tired. Thel was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. When he spoke, his words were heavy with resolve. Together, the Ledosian and the Keek turned their backs on the past and faced the uncertain future, ready to begin the long, hard work of building a new world from the ashes of the old. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.